Imagine a king so obsessed with pleasure that he had a custom-built sex chair, designed not just for passion, but for multiplying it. A throne of lust, engineered for orgies. This was real, and the man behind it was King Edward VII, the grandfather of Queen Elizabeth II, the so-called peacemaker of Europe, who moonlighted as Edward the Caresser. Before you judge him too quickly, wait until you hear the twisted details of his secret chamber in a Parisian brothel, his legendary appetite, not just for food but for women, and the scandalous family tree that still connects his mistresses to today's British royal family. You're about to enter the opulent, outrageous, and utterly jaw-dropping world of Britain's most libidinous monarch. This is the story of King Edward VII, a man who adored the pleasures of the flesh so much he commissioned an erotic device that allowed him to enjoy multiple lovers at once. We'll get to how that contraption worked in all its indulgent glory. Let's just say, Edward didn't hide his appetite. He had at least 50 known mistresses, and his most beloved was Alice Keppel, who, in a wild twist of fate, just so happens to be the great-grandmother of Camilla, Queen Consort to King Charles III. Edward's affairs caused not only scandal, but chaos, broken marriages, ruined reputations, and a monarchy constantly on the edge of disgrace. And, at his 1901 coronation, he invited his mistresses to Westminster Abbey, sat them down in a special pew reserved just for the king's ladies, and you thought modern royals were wild? Born on November 9, 1841 at Buckingham Palace, Edward was the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. At birth, he inherited titles like Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Rothesay, Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and Duke of Saxony. His parents dreamed he would become a flawless constitutional monarch. They pushed him into a brutal education program, tutors, books, endless lessons. But Edward had no love for studying. Where he excelled was charm, wit, and diplomacy. Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli once called him informed, intelligent, and sweet-mannered. But his parents didn't care. They were furious at his failures. Even worse, Victoria blamed him for Prince Albert's death. Why? Because just before Albert died of typhoid, he had rushed out in the rain to lecture Edward over an affair with an actress. That confrontation, some believed, pushed him over the edge. With no real royal duties, and the guilt of his father's death hanging over him, Edward descended into a world of pleasure, food, drink, gambling, and women. So many women. He became infamous for it, and he had decades to enjoy it. Queen Victoria ruled for 63 years, forcing Edward to wait until he was 59 before ascending the throne. As prince and later king, Edward was obsessed with food and sex in that order. His reign from 1901 to 1910 left most actual governing to others. That left him plenty of time and wealth to pursue his real interests. He was called Dirty Bertie, a nickname earned the hard way. He lost his virginity to a professional actress. When Edward was just 19 and serving in the British Army in Ireland, fellow officers realized the prince was still a virgin. So, they did what any honorable gentleman would do in the 19th century. They smuggled an actress into his bedchamber. That actress was Nellie Clifton, and Edward, then nicknamed Bertie, left Ireland as a man changed forever. His parents were furious. His father Albert took him for a long, cold walk in the rain to confront him. Days later, Albert died, and Queen Victoria would never forgive him. In a desperate bid to reform her son, Victoria arranged a marriage between Edward and Princess Alexandra of Denmark. Though they'd only met twice before the wedding, they eventually developed affection for each other. Alexandra bore him 6 children, though only 5 survived infancy. Their eldest son, Albert Victor, tragically died at age 28. A sculpture was commissioned for him that still stands in St. George's Chapel, a somber reminder of loss amid the wild decadence of Edward's life. Edward may have had a wife, but Paris was his true lover. In 1864, the 23-year-old prince visited the French capital and fell in love with its brothels. Aristocrats ended their nights in luxurious Parisian pleasure houses. But Edward? He reserved his own room at the most elite brothel, Le Chabanais, years in advance. He even had a bathtub filled with champagne for his most sensual escapades. Over time, his indulgence grew in every sense. He gained weight rapidly, but the king wasn't about to let his belly get between him and his desires. So in 1890, he commissioned a love chair, or siège d'amour, from French cabinet maker Louis Soubrier. This wasn't just furniture. It was a mechanical contraption that allowed Edward to lie back, let his lovers do the work, and engage with multiple women without his size getting in the way. Some say it allowed him to stand while they crouched or reclined. Others claim it was adjustable for a variety of positions. Whatever the truth, it was a throne built for lust, and it remained in his private room at Le Chabanais for years. Edward's long parade of mistresses began with Lily Langtry, an enchanting actress from Jersey who quickly became his first serious romantic obsession. For 3 passionate years they were inseparable, until the relationship unraveled when Langtry became pregnant, though the child was likely not Edward's. Following Langtry came Daisy Brooke, a striking society hostess married to Lord Brooke. Despite her respectable social standing, Daisy and Edward carried on a torrid affair that spanned 9 scandal-filled years. Their connection was less about love and more about mutual amusement, their escapades the stuff of whispered gossip in aristocratic circles. But it was Alice Keppel who would become the most notorious of all. She entered Edward's life in 1898, when he was 56 and she just 29. Unlike the others, Alice wasn't paid directly for her companionship. Instead, the king granted her shares in a rubber company, a gift that elevated her to a lifestyle befitting royalty. Their bond went beyond the bedroom. Alice became a trusted confidant, a political go-between, and a fixture at court, even holding his hand as he lay dying. Keppel wasn't just a lover, she was an operator. She passed messages between Edward and his ministers and played a quiet role in politics. When he was on his deathbed in 1910, Alexandra even allowed Keppel to be present. But once Edward died, her grief was so loud and uncontrollable, she had to be removed from the room. After that, Keppel and her family fled Britain. The rest of his mistresses, they came and went, roughly 50 of them. King Edward VII lived for excess. His meals were just as legendary as his love life. A typical day: 5-course breakfast, 10-course lunch, 12-course dinner, afternoon tea filled with cakes and sandwiches, supper just before bed, more cakes, more meat pies. At the opera, he demanded hour-long intermissions so he could enjoy cold trout and pastries in his box. His favorite tea, a custom blend by Fortnum and Mason, prepared especially for him. The kitchens of the palace ran like a restaurant for a man who could never get enough. Edward wasn't just a king, he was an empire of indulgence, a monarch who wielded his power not through war or politics, but through sheer, unapologetic pleasure. His appetite shook the foundations of Victorian morality and reshaped the image of the British monarchy. And yes, he really did have that love chair.